What are some deeply unsettling facts that you know? In the 1800s, a lot of dentures were made using the teeth of dead soldiers. People used to scavenge battlefields pulling the teeth from the dead. After the Battle of Waterloo, it was advertised that the teeth were from the battle like it was a novelty. And there were so many teeth available after Waterloo that scavenging for teeth was no longer profitable for those in Europe anyways. It was advertised because the dead were largely young men, and so presumably the teeth were still in decent condition. Like new. One previous owner. n.wikipedia.org Wiki kidnapping of J.C. Dugard. A convicted rapist managed to abduct an 11-year-old girl and keep her as a sex slave for 18 years, even forcing her to bear his children, all while being monitored by parole officers who remained clueless to what was going on for nearly 2 decades. Her kidnapping happened exactly 30 years ago today. His wife was in on the whole thing. Another thing I've wondered. How TF do these people find each other? I could kinda see it nowadays, but before the internet? Did he take her on a date and ask her, "So, what are your feelings in kidnapping and imprisonment of young women?" Right? Forget kidnapping, I was nervous to ask my girlfriend if she liked Lord of the Rings when we first met. Well, LOTR is okay. How do you feel about kidnapping? Match made in heaven. When the hobbits are taken to Isengard, do you see yourself more as the Urix or the hobbits? The world's most prolific living serial killer is a man called Pedro Lopez. He was convicted of the killing of 110 girls. But he claims he has raped and murdered over 300. His current whereabouts are unknown. n.m.wikipedia.org. Teresa rumored that the family members of his victims tracked him down after his release and killed him, but that's never been confirmed. Wait, so he was let out of prison? There's the right follow-up question. Man, it's even worse. He was released from prison in Ecuador, and then later on imprisoned in Colombia for another murder, and then released again. The USA has lost 6 nuclear weapons that were never found. I smell the plot to the next Call of Duty campaign. Never mind, that just happened in Cold War. It's actually the plot to a Tom Clancy book. Terminal lucidity is the return of mental clarity or memory or consciousness shortly before death. This happens to around 10% of people with dementia. My grandma was in a care facility for the last year of her life, due to dementia. My uncle and mom have a bad relationship and were arguing in her room over what needed to be done for her, and she yelled at them in the most conscious manner, "Chuck. Heidi. Stop fighting this instant," and then passed right there. She didn't recognize any of us for weeks before this. Good to know why that happened. Those are the most mom last words ever. She wasn't even one of the people arguing but got the ultimate last word. Impressive. Cows don't convert grass directly into protein. They have enormous colonies of bacteria in their stomachs that have population explosions when they eat grass, live, breed, die, and then the cows digest them into protein. Cows are bacteria ranchers. Cowception. Leafcutter ants are farmers too. They feed the leaves to a fungus and then eat that, not the leaves. The symptoms for a heart attack can be a lot milder than what is shown in movies or TV shows. I have seen people coming in with some discomfort and then passing due to a massive infarction when we did the angiogram. Quite a few years ago. My grandma took my grandpa to see their GP, and while at his appointment the doctor noticed the symptoms of a heart attack on my grandma. The doctor had her sent to the ER. She had a massive heart attack and she said she only felt mildly nauseous. She's most likely only alive because the GP used to be a cardiothoracic surgeon but gave it up to be a small town doctor. My grandma walked around with a heart infarct for months due to nobody recognizing it and her being too proud to admit she wasn't feeling well. There really needs to be more awareness about the less obvious symptoms of heart attacks. Rainbow Valley at Mount Everest is named so because of the colorful coats of dead people. The blue Mustang statue at the Denver airport, named Blucifer by the locals, killed its creator when a piece fell and severed an artery in his leg. If weird ghost stuff is happening, make sure your carbon monoxide detector is working. The Matthews and the Hart bridges in Jacksonville are about to fail. The pilings in the river do not touch bottom. I'm a commercial diver and I refuse to drive on these bridges. Edit, f.gov. Here you can read terminology and bridge ratings for every bridge in Florida. On the latest report, Matthews has a health index of 96 but a sufficiency rating of 44, while the heart is 90 and 30. That's my hometown. I hate those bridges. I hate knowing that several people I love drive over those bridges on a constant basis. They're just one more thing on the list of reasons I don't like Jacksonville. Why TF are those bridges still open for public? Still considered to be in fair condition by the Florida Department of Transportation. I live here and avoid them as well. It's a mess. Historically, our bridges have a grade of like a B compared to a C nationally. We have a lower number of structurally deficient bridges than other states of the country, said Kathleen Ruverak, Vice President of the Florida section of the American Society of Civil Engineers. This logic is absolutely terrifying. There were Holocaust survivors that died shortly after being liberated because their body couldn't handle the increased calories when they were fed by the soldiers that freed them. This is called refeeding syndrome for anyone curious. One of my foster doggos was at high risk of this, and it was horrendous withholding food from a dog who was nearly starved to death. It took months of painstakingly measuring out her food and giving tiny portions every few hours, weekly vet visits, and by the time she was healthy enough for adoption we'd just fallen so hard in love, so now she's our beautiful healthy baby Maggie Smile. Foster fail, lovely. The astonishing fatality rates that can be found in so many battles in the First World War weren't accidents or unfortunate byproducts of the technology, they were factored into the battle plans. By the nature of attritional warfare, it was calculated how many men would be lost every week, and commanders drew up enough reinforcements to replace them. This was called normal wastage. I remember reading about the German plan at Verdun. The idea was to attack a target the French couldn't afford to abandon and force them to throw more and more men into the meat grinder to hopefully deplete the French army. It almost worked too. Some regiments of the French army reported an over 100% casualty rate. Edit, I'm gonna chuck this here since so many people are asking. It's possible for the casualty rate to be over 100% because when men die or become wounded they get replaced to keep the unit at full strength, and if those men become casualties as well, it's possible for a unit of say 1,000 men to suffer 1,200 casualties over a particularly long and bloody battle like Verdun. In 2018 my sister was murdered. We know who did it. We keep track of where he lives. He has moved 4 times since my sister disappeared. The police also know he did it. Therese, not enough evidence to bring him in or charge him. Her body has still never been found. If I go after him he becomes the victim and I won't be able to be a father to my children. He gets to be alive every day. Hess, a serial rapist. We suspect my sister was not his first murder. From our interactions with state police and FBI, my impression is that our situation, while a nightmare, is perhaps not as rare as you would normally assume or hope. If FBI is connected, I assume he has been on the radar for a few years. In 1933, a doctor named Karl Tonsler raided the tomb of a female patient with whom he'd become obsessed and stole her body. He lived with the corpse for 7 years. As the body fell apart, he attached the corpse's bones together with wire and coat hangers, and fitted the face with glass eyes. He was only caught when someone saw him dancing with the corpse in front of an open window. Hey, how about we ditch this musty-looking mausoleum and head back to my place? They used to not use anesthesia on babies when they would do surgery. When I was a toddler, 3 years, in the early 80s I tripped and fell, which required 11 stitches in my chin. In the they strapped me down and did all 11 stitches with no anesthesia. I remember that shit like it was yesterday. So painful, and I was screaming at the top of my lungs. My poor mother couldn't be in the room. Edit, I'm reading all your stories and I just want to give y'all a big internet hug. Also, shout out to the parents and people who took us to the bloody and injured. As a parent I couldn't even imagine dealing with some of these experiences. Hold the duck up. How was the constant screaming not a dead giveaway that babies feel pain? Were they just like, dang, this kid's really loud? Edit, okay, I get it. There are multiple reasons they didn't give it to babies. I don't need an anesthesiology lecture. They knew kids felt pain. They thought that because younger kids don't develop long-term memories, it would hurt but be forgotten and have no long-term effects.